Outward is a very ambitious game for an indie title that I was actually planning on reviewing earlier this year. I then saw the definitive edition released back in May of this year and decided to revisit this title to see if it still holds up. Developed and released in 2019 by 9 Dot Studio, this RPG features a large open world, Souls-like combat, and even both online and split-screen multiplayer. I've put about 30 hours in this title and still feel like I can get a ton more. With that said, is it a game I can recommend to everyone, or will the lack of certain AAA features get in the way of the player's enjoyment? When you start the game, you can choose between normal and hardcore mode, and are given a pretty basic character creation after doing so. I created a cool looking white-haired female for this one. I'll just say it's a descendant of Uncle Ramon in some way. The start of this game is a bit odd. You originally start off shipwrecked, but after falling asleep, you end up back home in the lighthouse at Cierzo. You'll then find out that you need to pay off your blood price by either getting 150 silver coins or earning a tribal favor within 5 days. It's an interesting way to start the game, giving you a sense of urgency, but more than enough time to explore the world in front of you. While the start seems promising story-wise, it definitely takes a huge backseat to everything else. Like many of these large open world games, you can ignore it for the most part. I mainly played this game with a controller, which I personally recommend. As stated in the introduction, the game features Souls-like combat. You have everything you can expect, including weak attacks, strong attacks, dodge rolls, blocking, enemy lock-on, and of course, stamina management. Some tweaks, however, give it a far more unique identity compared to others. For one, each enemy, including yourself, has an impact bar. This determines how many hits they can take before getting knocked out. The lower it is, the easier it is for the person to get stun locked. This helps to encourage variation, as having a weapon with high impact may be just as useful, if not more so, than a weapon with high damage. There are also skills that can be learned both active and passive. Both will cost the user silver coins. These active skills, including spells, can be used in and out of combat for various benefits. For example, instead of using a fire spell to attack an enemy, that same spell can be used for lighting a campfire. Other skills like kick may seem useless, but it's a great way to throw the enemy off balance. Magic also exists, but you will need to learn to activate it at a ley line. I'ma just come out right now and say it though, this game is freaking hard, and even flirts with being genuinely frustrating at times. This is especially true early on with very little money and equipment to work with. If you've played games from Piranha such as from the Gothic, Risen, or Elix series, you'll feel right at home with the level of early game difficulty. While things definitely do get easier when you get better equipment and skills, some enemies will still be a challenge to deal with in 1v1 situations. It's no surprise then that death will be an eventuality. When you are defeated, a variety of things can happen. The basic gist is you'll wake up somewhere and will need to pick up your bag again. Sometimes you'll end up in a bandit camp and will need to get everything back. If you play the hardcore mode, there's a % chance of you permanently meeting your end. I personally will just recommend sticking with the normal mode, but if you are a masochist, be my guest. Honestly, this game should just be renamed to Cash Money Boss, since that's really the only way to progress in this game. The more money you have, the better the equipment you can afford, and the more skills you can purchase. You are somewhat limited in advanced skills since you can only have 3 breakthrough points to work with, but you can still get a ton of useful skills regardless. It's also worth noting that you don't gain any sort of experience points or level up from killing enemies or anything like that. Or if you want, feel free to call it backtracking. The only fast travel this game features is to one place that is only accessible by speaking to one of the caravans. Outside of that, you'll have to walk constantly to get anywhere you want to go. This isn't a problem if you remain in the first area, but once you leave to go to the forest or marsh areas, you'll realize just how much backtracking you'll end up doing. Honestly, a majority of my playtime comes down to just running from town to town, completing quests, and learning new skills. I really wish you were able to ride a horse in order to cut back on the backtracking, or a more dedicated fast traveling system using the caravans similar to Morrowind. The map also doesn't mark where you are on it, so you'll need to use landmarks to determine your location. I was fine with it, but it gets very tedious at night. Thankfully, there is a method to the madness. Returning to previously visited towns and dungeons may open up new quest lines and loot to find. Many of these new quest lines may also contain unique rewards and possibly opening up new paths that were unexplorable before. It helps to further the reward of exploration and gives incentive to revisit past destinations. Inventory management is another pain point for me. At first, you'll most likely not be able to fill up your inventory quickly. Once you find better equipment and plan on selling it, however, is when it becomes a problem. Even if you don't plan on selling, There are just so many things that you can be affected by, whether it is poison, infection, indigestion, a million debuffs, and even the common freaking cold of all things. You'll need the correct consumables to combat all of these. It also doesn't help that money, aka silver, weighs you down. This can be easily combated though, getting gold bars, because apparently gold bars weigh less than silver coins. I don't know. There's also the fact that you'll need to eat, sleep, and drink water throughout the adventure. As expected, you'll need to cook raw foods in order to avoid disease, as well as drinking clean water. Sleep is not only important for filling the need, but is also used to repair equipment and restore lost health and stamina. I didn't find this too difficult to do, especially since there's basically food everywhere in the monsters you kill and the plants you can harvest berries from. Crafting is another huge element in this game. Outside of making food and potions, knowing the recipe and having the right materials can create some powerful weapons and armor. It's awesome taking out an incredibly powerful monster only to use its parts to use against even stronger enemies. And if you don't want to use those weapons, crafting them is still good to sell for that cash money boy I mentioned earlier. It reminds me of Monster Hunter, and I appreciate this element a ton. The definitive edition improved the graphic fidelity as expected. Outward always looked decent considering the fact that it was on the Unity engine. While the animations are largely the same, the character models, environments, and especially the lighting look far better. It definitely is one of the better looking Unity engine games by far. The music is also pretty freaking awesome. So many memorable tracks on display here, especially when traversing the environment. Thankfully, the game's soundtrack is available for purchase, which is always appreciated when a developer does this. I unfortunately wasn't recording when playing split screen with someone, but it definitely elevates the experience in my opinion, especially during the early game hurdle. When someone goes down, they can be revived by their partner. This also allows for some interesting party combinations and can help with the limited inventory space. Combat is also far easier having one person distract the enemy while the other does the damage. Despite the lack of certain quality of life features like fast travel, I still see myself coming back to it. Maybe I just like a challenge, or maybe I'm just a masochist at heart. I recommend it for people who crave a more difficult RPG with Souls-like combat, a ton of exploration, and a pretty good crafting system. For those looking for something more accessible, feel free to steer clear of this one. Thank you guys for watching as always. Please like, share, and subscribe. And this is Powerhouse, signing off.